So quite a few of you have been asking me what token tanks or battle pass tanks do I recommend getting in this season of the battle pass, since we have obviously got a new tank with the Kpz 07 Project HK, but you obviously still do have every single other tank. For those wondering, if you don't know how to get there, just click the massive middle whatever number you're on for the battle pass, and then go up to the top right and you'll see items for tokens. You can click that and then you'll be greeted with the selection screen. Now I'm going to work my way down from bottom to top because these are the oldest tanks, and then as we move up higher it also increases the token amount, but it also increases how new the tanks are. So starting off with the phase 1. Do I recommend getting a phase 1? I mean, for 9 tokens, sure. Like, you honestly cannot go wrong. This is probably the best heavy tank out of all of them. Yes, it has weak spots. Yes, you will get penned in the cheeks either side of the gun here, as well as the cupola, but the cupola is kind of hard to hit if you're using AP. If you're using heat, it's a lot easier because, I mean, it doesn't really matter where you hit it. It's just going to go straight in. But this is a solid all-round tank. It's slow, so you're going to have to put a turbo on it if you want it to be, you know, fast enough. But this is a tank that is part way between like an M103 and a Conqueror. It's not quite as good as the Conqueror at tier 9, but it's definitely better than an M103. You get decent enough standard rounds at 258, and you do get 340 heat, as you can see right here. DPM isn't anything insanely good, but it's more than enough for most of what you're going to be doing, especially if you are being a heavy tank. You do have 400 alpha, so it's more than manageable. And just like with all the other Battle Pass token tanks, you do get a standard large repair kit, which will increase your regular repair speed by 15% instead of the 10% of a normal large repair kit. So you do get a bonus in that regard. And this is completely free to use. You can use it infinite amounts of times. You get a large repair kit always on the vehicle. Now moving on to the 777-2. This is again fine. However, it lacks DPM compared to the phase 1. And you also kind of give up the gun. Like, the gun is not as nice to use on this tank as it is on the phase 1. However, you do gain another 40 alpha damage per shot, so that is something that you might want to consider. It definitely is a lot better in the armor department than the phase 1. You can side scrape with this tank really, really well. You can also just go head on to people and they will not be able to pen you. Like, the only way that they're going to be able to pen you is in the cupola, which is super, super small, or in the lower plate. There is one thing that you need to take into consideration. This little top bar here is 50mm thick, which means that 152mm caliber guns will overmatch you if they're firing obviously AP or APCR. So just keep that in mind, especially considering this is slightly sloped down, so that is going to be a problem for you. But overall, this is a nice tank. You could, you know, toss up between the two. I would rather go with the phase over this tank. You know, they're the same amount of tokens, and you can definitely get more than just one tank if you're going for only the 9 token tanks in the battle pass if you do purchase the improved pass. Next up, the K91 PT, and I wouldn't recommend this tank at all, to be honest. The thing is, it's kind of troll. It has some okay armor. It has no gun arc whatsoever. Like, this gun arc is non-existent, so you're gonna have to be turning your tank a lot. Not to mention that the gun is pretty derpy at 0.28 standard, and it has a horrible, horrible aiming time, and you get only -5 degrees of gun depression, or 5.5 I should say. This is not a nice tank to play. It's really not. And it's kind of unfortunate because this would be nice to actually play if it wasn't for that gun arc, because the gun arc ruins this tank. I mean, against tier 8s and below, yeah, your armor's going to be insanely good, but against tier 9s and tier 10s, if they're firing 340 heat or 330 heat, you're going to be having a problem. So I would just flat out avoid this tank. The Char Future 4, this tank is beautiful. A lovely bit of French engineering, even if it does go pretty slow in reverse. This is probably the most sophisticated tank out of all of them. You get a 4-shot autoloader with 4-second injure clip and a very, very long reload. However, it doesn't matter because you get really, really nice standard shells, you get really, really nice premium shells, and it's okay accuracy. Like, 0.33 is really good. However, sometimes it will just become a bit derpy sometimes. I don't know why. It's definitely not like it's 0.3 base, but for the most part, it's more than accurate enough. You obviously get a very, very nice power to weight and also a nice top speed. Not a lot of view range, unfortunately, which is kind of a little bit disappointing, especially considering this is now a medium tank. You know, unlike the heavy tanks where view range doesn't really matter too much. It would be nice to see that this had more view range than it has, but either way, it's okay. I mean, you can stick optics on it. I'd probably recommend you go for either, I mean, definitely vents and stab, and then you could go for optics or IAU, depending on what you would like to use on it. Now, the Kpz Panzer. This tank, I'd flat out avoid. It's not worth it. The siege mode is a gimmick in this tank. It basically makes it a little bit more accurate at the cost of a lot of DPM. And it's just not worth it. This tank is not worth playing. It's got a bit of a derpy gun, 0.4, which means that you want to be in that siege mode, but at the same time, you don't want to be in that siege mode. And it even gets a faster top reverse speed than the Char, which is very strange. But yeah, this tank, I would avoid. It has 0 armor at all. Yes, it has nice gun depression. Yes, it has, you know, the siege mode where you can kind of become a little bit more accurate, but it's just a gimmick. After about like 2 or 3 games, you will not be using it because it's just not worth it. I believe it gets like -7 or 8 degrees of gun depression in normal mode, and then it goes down to obviously -15 here. It's really not worth the 12 tokens, considering that you can go and get a Char, which is going to cost you 9 tokens. Nah, the Kpz Panzer, it ain't it. Speaking of tanks that ain't it, we have the Lorraine 50T. This thing has absolutely abysmal DPM. Like, this thing is horrible. It has 0 armor. You can go straight through this little viewport here, and the hull armor is non-existent. Like, it is a horrible, horrible machine. And if you are spending 18 tokens on this, no. For 18 tokens, you could get 2 of the other tanks. You get a Char, and you get a phase 1 for that amount of tokens. Like, it's not worth it. Now, moving on to the newer tanks, and yes, disclaimer, I haven't played the BZ, I haven't played the Cobra, and I haven't played the Project HK. And nor will I be getting the BZ, because this has a horrible gun. Like, that is very, very bad. 250 pen, and, I mean, sure, the DPM isn't awful, but 0.35, nearly a 3-second aiming time. It doesn't even get 330 heat or 340 heat. Like, it's one of those tanks where it's just a letdown. When you compare this thing to a phase 1, it's like, why would I play this? And it costs 24 tokens. Not to mention the lower plate is massive. Like, that is a massive, massive lower plate. Like, that is a big old slab that you can just easily penetrate if it's out in the open. Yes, sure, upper plate, very, very strong. So is the turret to a certain degree. You do, however, have the same problem as the 777, which means that this is 50mm thick, so 152mm guns are going to go straight through you and overmatch you with AP and APCR, and you do have 2 cupolas at the top. Although, you should always really go for the right-hand cupola because that one is a lot easier to hit. Not to mention, the other problem with this tank is that when it side scrapes, it gets 0 armor. To show you exactly what I mean, I am going to tanks.gg here, and we'll use AP just to fully show you. And as you can see, as soon as it side scrapes, you get a lovely, lovely little shot right there that you can easily hit, especially if you're up close to them. I mean, obviously, further away, yeah, sure, it's going to be a bit of a harder shot. But considering that usually they're going to be roughly at this angle, you can even just go and overmatch the back here. So when someone is looking at you, like, say, like this, you can go right next to the turret, just the left-hand side, and go straight through them. And that's the same for both sides. 24 tokens, well spent if you got that thing. I mean, you could have got 2.5 phase 1s for that. Now, probably the most infamous tank on the list, the Cobra. Yes, this thing is worth your 24 tokens if you plan on getting this tank, and if you plan on spending your tokens. It is insanely, like, just broken, to be honest. The thing is, this tank gets like a 2k clip potential, or over 2k clip potential. It's so unbelievably busted. I do not know how it is still in its current form. Because the thing is, this thing is exactly like an FE4005 or an FE215B183. It gets basically a derp gun. But this time, it is not as derpy, and you can reload it, and you have 4 chances to pen them. This thing completely maxed out is unreal, right? You get 0.32 accuracy, you go at 45 forwards, then 30 in reverse if you use a turbo with the turbocharging field mod, 3.3 seconds suspension repair time. Like, what? And then the magic trick with this tank is not that you use the heat rounds, or not even that you use the other HE rounds. You use the premium HE rounds, which have 210 penetration with 490 alpha, which gives you roughly 2k clip potential. I mean, if you high roll, it's over 2k. But that's not even like the worst part about this tank. It's that it gets a 1.5 second intro clip, meaning that you can dish out your 2k clip potential in about 4.5 seconds. That will take tier 8 and 9 heavies to 0 in about 5 seconds if you pen all your shots. This thing is not healthy for the game, but here it is. And yes, as I said earlier, I will be picking up the Cobra. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to get the Projekt 07HK first or the Cobra. I'm still undecided, but let's now move on to the Projekt. This thing is the newest tank to the Battle Pass, and also maybe one of the most devastating. It's not like the Cobra, where you get that insane like alpha damage in a very, very short amount of time. This thing will tear you apart in a matter of minutes. Maybe even in a matter of under a minute. You could easily full HP kill a mouse in under a minute and still go on to then do another 1,000 something odd damage to another mouse. When this thing is fully kitted out, you get 4,300 DPM. If you then went and put a gun rammer directive, you would get 4,400. This is only with bounty. I mean, what could we actually get it to? 4,500 exactly. That is mental. For a tier 9 tank destroyer, 4.8 second reload for 360 alpha. And 360 alpha is not some alpha damage that you can just ignore. Like, that is deadly alpha damage. That's not like 320 from a K91, where sometimes it will just low roll down to like 200 something, and you think, it's fine, you know, what's that banging I can hear on my mouse, where it will slowly like tear you apart. You will notice this. If that high rolls to 400 and it keeps happening every 4.8 seconds, you are in a lot of trouble. So for 27 tokens then, is this worth it? I think it is. And one of the main reasons why this is so worth it is that even if you have a 122mm caliber gun, you can't overmatch it. You need to have a gun that is 135 plus, which is like such a weird number. Even the IS-7 cannot pen this because its impacted armor is 45mm thick, which means you're just going to be ricocheting literally everything unless they hit the middle plate. So if you go hold down, yeah, sure, they could go and hit this, you know, tiny box. That's a very, very hard shot to hit. And if you're very far away as well, good luck. I'm thinking that I get this thing first and then the Cobra, because this looks very, very interesting, at least on paper. I did watch Godpack play this tank on his stream, and he was kind of having a rough time of it in some stages, but for the most part, like, this thing just tears people apart as soon as they, especially if you can perma-track them. Like, this thing's deadly if you can perma-track someone. So this tank's definitely not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but if you like the UDES 03 at tier 8 and you like the STRV line, this could be pretty nice for you. So that is going to be it for my opinions on the Battle Pass tanks and if you should pick them up and if you shouldn't. Just quickly, I'll recap. So phase 1, yes, 777 if you want. K91 PT, no. Char, yes. Kpz Projekt, no. Lorraine 50T, no. BZ, no. Cobra, yes. And then Projekt 07HK, yes if you like the STRV line. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.